Hey, what's up YouTube? So today I'm gonna talk about this long journey I had to get to 6k deep delve. So at the start of the league, I always wanted to delve because it was actually one of the few things that I haven't done before in PoE, and everyone always mentions how the grind to 6k is super mentally draining. But the caveat is that I wanted to delve with Aurastacker instead of the meta like mine builds or brand builds, because this league I was the only person to reach 6k solo without using a brand or mines for the majority of the time. I think the journey took around like 6 weeks, and it really extended the playtime of PoE. Although I was like super lazy in the last month, and I was only playing like 4 hours every 2 days. Now the delve journey was pretty rough at the start. I started with my regular like low life build before I had to transition to CI later on. But funnily enough, delve was actually easier from 3.5 to 6k than 1.5 to 1.5 to 3.5k. A lot of that came down to knowing the pathing and the routing a lot better. But a huge factor was that once your damage is high enough, it really doesn't matter what depth you are as long as you're able to kill the mobs fast enough. And all that really matters is the mods on the side of the map. Now you might be wondering, what am I talking about and why is it easier after 3.5k? So if you look at the depth chart here, and this is around 2k, you can see how there's a bunch of Azurite nodes, right? And doing these tier 3 Azurite nodes, or even tier 2, or some of these other nodes, are much more time consuming, and they're also pretty dangerous with bad mods. So now let's go back to depth 6000, which is where we're at. Now, if you look here, you can see that most of these camps are now just regular camps, and a lot of these camps just auto-complete as soon as you get there. So after you get to like 3.5k, most of those Azurite nodes turn into these smuggler stashes or camps, and you just run there and it automatically completes. And here's a pretty cool thing I found, this chart. So it pretty much tells you the delve HP scaling. So you can see at 6k, after 6k there's no more mods, so that's pretty much like the holy grail of what a delver wants to get to. So you can see how much harder it is before 6k than after 6k. So a lot of people are super impressed by people who get to like 30k depth. But after 6k the game is a lot easier on delve. It's much more consistent because there's no more mods. Some of the bad mods are like cannot freeze, rare monsters, which like you just instantly die to Storm Herald, or any life mods. So basically the 3 life mods are just percent life, crit damage reduction, and resist. So you can see how when you have all 3 of these resists, you're pretty much doing a node that has 350% more life than a node after like 6k at like 20k. So the hardest delve ever is actually at like 5.9k with triple life mods. Now I did this build with something that was pretty off meta because no one plays an Aurastacker. 2 people did Aurastacker last league, Path of Math and someone else. But this league, everyone thought that Aurastacker was dead because of all of the alternate quality nerfs, the aura nerfs. So one might think that the build has to be like completely different, but the build is actually remarkably similar between the Deep Delver and the regular Aurastacker. So the only changes I made was I went CI with Sacca Walls, because without CI you'll just instantly die to the chaos damage from the degen when you kill the zombies. But if you look here, most of the gear is the same. I have a Nebulous, Call of the Brotherhoods, Sacca Walls, Hands of the High Templar. I use Torrent Reclamation, and these boots are pretty much what I would use on a regular build. And for the amulet, I replaced percent ES with another pen mod. And the helmet is identical, except instead of percent ES, I went for chance to gain power charge on kill. And instead of a shield that you would usually have, you have 2 Nebuluses because they're pretty much unbeatable in damage. I didn't even divine Nebuluses that well. They could actually be better divine, and I probably should have done it. But yeah, I just get double damage on them, on the Nebuluses, 2 of them, and that's about all you need. So you can see that the builds are very similar. The flasks, the only difference is instead of Aziri's Promise that a lot of people use, I use Dying Sun, because the more coverage you have, the better. Now, everyone also mentioned how important like corpse removal and summon skeletons are, But in this journey, I did it with no corpse removal and no summon skeletons or vault summon skeletons. Because this build was pretty limited on gem sockets. I actually was not sure how good summon skitterbots are for delving. I know it increases the PoB tooltip DPS, but I was not really sure how good it was actually, so I could have dropped one of these auras that I had. Now, one of the biggest things that I found out while delving was you could get a lot more projectile speed with anomalous blood and sand. The alternate quality of anomalous blood and sand grants you projectile speed. And you can see here with enhanced linked to anomalous blood and sand, I'm getting 47% increased projectile speed while in sand stance. And this is absolutely huge because I'm already linking enhanced to purity of ice. So purity of ice here gives me 2% times like 3.5, so 7% cold pen, which is not too bad. And I also use this one, Divergent Smoke Mine, to get an extra bit of attack and cast speed. Now, I'm a firm believer of using this belt over the low life belt because I know like last league, the people who did delve, Path of Math used the low life belt, but Torrent's Reclamation is pretty much absolutely insane. Like if you ever play without the Summon Greater Harbinger of Time, the difference in playstyle is absolutely insane. So if you have the damage to do it, I would always recommend delving with Torrent's Reclamation. So I have a 9% increased move speed implicit on this belt. So I'm going to go over each piece of gear real fast. So Nebuluses, we have double damage and multi, and double damage is crit chance for spells. I would get another one with multi, but it just didn't exist on the market. And after a certain point, I just stopped buying gear upgrades because the damage I deemed was already enough to reach 6k. Now this helm is just a regular aura stacking helm with RMR, elevated Warlord, and then Aug crit on the multi. And I think I Auged Influence to hit Power Charge on kill because I actually really need a Power Charge on kill since I had no way to generate Power Charges because there's just no way to get it. And Power Charges are actually insane on this build because the crit is not quite 100% without Power Charges. So I just got lucky actually getting it. And then, let's see. Then the necklace, this is the same amulet that pretty much all Aurastackers use, except instead of the elemental pen, most people get 20% ES, so that's like one of the changes. Call of the Brotherhoods, I use a level 21 Hatred and level 21 Wrath. They're pretty standard, and a +4 stack of walls. So most of this gear is like, oh yeah, we forgot about the boots. Can't forget about the boots, right? So I opted for, instead of Skyforth, which both people used last league, with these new boots that came out because of the elevated mods. So you have the increased effect of Tailwind, which is huge. You have elevated Onslaught, which pretty much gives you 9% or 10% extra move speed on top. So 45% move speed on this pair of boots as long as you have Onslaught up, which makes it about the same as the 7 League Steps. And then it has the elevated Pierce for better coverage, and Aspect of the Avian to get me the Avian bonus from Sack of Walls. The flasks are pretty normal. Quicksilver Adrenaline, Cinder Swallow Urn, Bottle of Faith, Diamond Flask, and Dying Sun. Now I'm going to go through... Oh, shit. I didn't even notice that I had Elementalist. Whoops, so I did some of the nodes later on with the wrong. So let me respec this real fast so I can show you everyone. So this is the pathing that I did. So Scion, you don't really need Guardian. Like most people go Guardian for the Aurastacker. And the Aurastacker does not need Guardian because anything will kill you in one shot. So I decided to opt for Raider because movement speed I truly believe is everything. And this gives us Onslaught while on full frenzy charges, and also a chance to get more frenzy charges, and it gives us phasing. Now phasing is important because we don't want to rely on using a flask for phasing, a quartz flask. And the only way to get phasing is through a Watcher's Eye with, I think it's Grace or Haste. I think it's Haste. But I wanted to use Watcher's Eye with Grace move speed for even more move speed. So I have this Watcher's Eye. Now this Watcher's Eye is actually very, very expensive. So right around somewhere like 400 or 500 exalts. So if you actually lack damage, you would go Champion if you were short a breakpoint, or you would go Berserker. Now Berserker I think is the most damage, but I think in terms of delving speed, Raider is the best choice. Now, most of this build's cost is in its cluster jewels and stack of walls. So we have these cluster jewels that I corrupted for RMR. And this was actually one of the most annoying parts. I bought like 60 of these cluster jewels at a time and was trying to vol orb them for a reduced mana reserved. And I think it's actually a 1 in 60 chance to get it. I ended up buying probably half of them, and I corrupted half of them myself. So each one of these cluster jewels at the start when I did it was like 200 exalts, but then I think people started figuring out that you could buy first amount replenishing and then vol orb it yourself and sell it for like 100x and still make insane amounts of money. So now I think these jewels are probably like 85 exalts or something. So you can see all my cluster jewels. They're all reduced mana reserved. Reduced mana reserve, reduced mana reserve. So dude, my gear is actually insane. Like all this stuff costs a lot of money. And now after that, I opted for a 3 large cluster and 1 voices setup. Now I truly believe that the large cluster setup is just more damage than voices can ever possibly hope for. With 3 large clusters, you pretty much gain 30% more damage because you gain 10% of lightning damage extra cold damage against chilled enemies, and you also gain like 60% aura effect. And at a certain point, voices has a diminishing return because what you get for voices is you get more jewel sockets, and when you have too much crit multi, you get each percent of crit multi is worth less and less. So the main point of voices is to get another RMR jewel socket with more multi. Now the thing is that I was actually had too much mana, so I could have probably dropped some of my jewels at the end here. So you see how these are RMR jewels. I could have went with a quad multi jewel, but like I said, the damage of delve that you need is overstated. Like a lot of people told me before the journey that I needed around like 300 million POV spark DPS, but it's just not true. In the end, I probably had around 150 mil, but you could probably do the journey to 6k with like 80 mil DPS on spark. So I wanted to go over my gem links real fast. So I have Spark, Divergent Arcane Surge, Awaken Copen, Divergent Inspiration, Awaken Spell Echo, and Awaken Control Destruction. Now, some people argue Arcane Surge is worse than Pinpoint, but the most important times for your damage is while you're running through the passage to the next node. So I feel like Pinpoint will not be worth it because you're not standing still that much. And for auras, I have Herald of Purity. So I'm running a triple Herald setup to maximize my aura effectiveness from, what's it called, Purposeful Harbinger. So I have 3 Heralds, Herald of Ice, Herald of Purity, and Herald of Thunder. I have Malevolence here. And I have Empower, Zealotry, and Phantasmal Smite, along with Haste, because I empowered Haste to get more movement speed. And here I have Anomalous Blood and Sand, Enhance, Divergent Purity of Ice, Divergent Smoke Mine. And I have Frostwall, Awaken Spell Cascade. And these are pretty... I like Spell Cascade a lot, but I've played without it, so I don't really know. It just feels a lot smoother to play with Awaken Spell Cascade, in my opinion, because it makes this Frostwall like insane. Like if you look here, you have this many frost walls come out. If you take it out, it's literally like one little thing, so it's quite a big difference, but it costs a gem slot. And here we have Purity of Lighting, Summon Skitterbots, and Precision. And I don't run Purity of Fire. If you look at my defenses, I actually have 5% physical damage reduction. I have Evasion, which I think is really strong, and I have negative 35% fire res, and then I've capped Cold and Lightning at 90% because it benefits the Nebulous. Now here is a clip of me finally reaching 6k. You can see I'm here. I'm actually playing Arc. Now Spark is by far the best setup, and it's not even close, but this is just to demonstrate how much damage the Aurastacker actually kind of has with any skill. And this is Arc. It just clears the node at 6k, and this was when I finally reached 6k. And you could kind of see that Arc is just finding damage and it's not really lacking anything. And this is with like gear that's like not perfect at all. There's people with better gear than this. Yeah, and this is how it looks. Like you could play Arc, you can play Spark. I'm actually not really sure what other skills you could possibly do, but there's probably other ones that you could think of. Like, even though I was playing Arc, Spark is by far the skill of choice. I just want to go over real fast like how overpowered Spark is. for the Aurastacker in general and in delving. Like, I know one of the top groups actually uses a spark of an Aura bot for delve at the start. Mechanically, the skill is just insane because it gets scaled with duration. So you go on the path of building, and you see that spark only has like 100 million damage, but in reality, the damage is like 3 to 4 times that because of the duration. So spark is a skill that has an extra multiplier of duration. So if you ever do bosses with spark, you'll see that the longer you cast, the more damage you'll seem to do exponentially when the sparks fill up the entire arena. And if you ever do an invitation with spark, you'll see that if you can pre-cast and let the bosses out, the bosses will stand no chance and they'll pretty much instantly die and flop over. Now I wanted to talk about some tips I have for delving, because along the way, after like 1.5 months, I do have some knowledge to share that I wish I knew at the start. Number one thing is, do not be stubborn. Like, a node might seem like it's only one node away, but in reality it could take a long time to finish. And a lot of times a node is probably just undoable, even though it's so close. Especially if you're like stuck behind a boss or something, or you have like really bad anti-freeze biome, it's almost always better to go around. And I wish I learned that from the start, but sometimes you gotta fail a lot before you learn. And in addition, you need to find out which spots are safe to stand. Now, I know from mines and brands, you can probably look it up in a guide. But if you ever want to do any deep delving with an Aurastacker, you have to find the spots yourself, and I can tell you most of them. Like, you can pretty much tell most of the nodes. You can just stand in the middle, put ice walls around you, and you should be fine. Now, there's some nodes that won't be fine. If there's drop bears, you have to stand at the start of the node. If it's like the dusty vents, you have to stand with the tornadoes. You have to stand at the start. And the dragon, when the dragon comes down, you have to, the tier 3 Azurite dragon, you have to run away, and hopefully he flies around and then you come back and kill him. But Spark is a pretty like chill setup. Like, most of the time you just run there, you put down the frost wall like right here, and then everything just dies, and hopefully stuff just gets frozen and your Spark has good coverage and you're fine. And the next thing I have is learn pathing. Like, I looked at the YouTube video because like all the nodes, the passageways has little hints in there that tells you where to go. Like, there's a little circle or dot or somewhere along the path, and you can tell where you should go. Like, all you can just think of delve. Like, you see how right there I went through a small little slit, and it's almost always going to be that if you see a small narrow passageway like that. You can just think of delve as a bunch of little squares, and they're just all conjoined together, and the same passageway will always, so it'll always be the same. So a good delver can just like, will never make a wrong turn most of the times and be able to run straight to the node. Now that we're on the topic of movement speed, if your character has the damage, movement speed is everything. The faster you move, the more nodes you can clear, and the more safe you'll be. And movement speed is pretty much related directly to your currency per hour in delve. Oh yeah, and learn to use smoke mine. You can get around corners real fast, and the smoke mine also gives you a significant movement speed buff. Now, the question is, would I delve again in 3.14, and what I think of delve right now? So delve in 3.14 is actually nerfed supposedly at the high end, but I don't actually think that it will have an impact on the profit of delvers unless the fracture fossils appears really early on at like 200 depth instead of like 1500 depth like it is right now. Because if the fracture fossils are rarer in general, then the price should balance out, and that the fracture fossils will cost more because it's just like simple market economy. Now, the only way that delve could be like dead as an income source, or like a lot worse, is if it's really common at like depths of 2 to 300 compared to before. Now, for Ultimatum League, this build should still be pretty good. We'll know a lot more after the patch notes, and I might make like a mini delve guide afterwards, after the patch notes are out. And I will probably try some delve on the side. Like, if I have soul fight, I'll probably go clear some nodes, go see how it is. But I feel like anyone who plays the Aurastacker and wants to invest some time to delve, you can easily get to 2 to 3k, and probably even lower with like gear if you have 50 to 6 million tooltip on Spark. And you might be pretty close to getting to 6k. with like 100 million, 80 million to 100 million on pop, and I think you can get to 6K as long as you're patient enough. It's a pretty fun journey overall, and I hope you enjoyed this video and me going over the gear and my mentality behind why I chose some of the gear choices I did. Again, thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.